Chevy Biscayne State Patrol car. In the late 1950 seconds, Chevrolet's Biscayne was the no-frills, all-bills, full-size Chevy, the cheapest big car in the showroom, stripped of fancy trim so fleets, taxi companies, and police departments could get maximum metal for minimum money. For $1,959, the Biscayne moved to Chevy's wild new Batwing body with an X-frame chassis, wider track, lower roofline, and those famous horizontal tail fins. But it still sat at the bottom of the price list, making it perfect for duty as a state patrol workhorse. Under the hood, though, things could get very serious. Chevrolet's new W Series 348 Big Block, available in several high-compression solid lifter versions up to the 305 horsepower range, meant even the bargain basement sedan could be ordered with real muscle when the right boxes were ticked. That's exactly what happened when the Oregon State Patrol asked Chevrolet for a truly fast pursuit car. Chevrolet engineer and future Corvette legend Zora Arkus Duntov massaged a special 348 for a run of about 401959 Biscayne pursuit cars, upping compression, fitting a solid lifter camshaft of his own design, and turning the engine into a roughly 305 horsepower highway hunter that wasn't listed on normal dealer order sheets. These cars were delivered new to the Oregon State Patrol, essentially as undercover hot rods. Plain two-door Biscayne sedans in dark blue, dog dish caps, rubber floor mats, basic bench seats, 3-on-the-tree manual gearbox, heavy-duty suspension and brakes, and very little to tip off a speeder that the cheap Chevy in the mirror had a race-bred big block under the hood. Period motor trend coverage of the 1959 Biscayne Police Pursuit Package praised the brakes and high-speed stability, showing that the car wasn't just fast in a straight line, but also tough enough to survive repeated hard stops and long, wide-open throttle runs, exactly what a trooper needed on empty western highways. Modern auction and feature write-ups of surviving cars confirm just how special this package was. Date, code correct. 348 seconds, police-only specifications, and documentation that these machines were never offered to the general public, only to the State Patrol. Rambler Rebel 320. When people talk about early muscle cars, they usually jump straight to GTOs and big black Chevys. But back in 1957, the real troublemaker in a sensible suit was the Rambler Rebel, a Facton 1957 mid-size four-door hardtop that looked like a family car and then showed up to Daytona and embarrassed Corvettes. American Motors was known for thrifty Ramblers and economy-minded buyers. Yet, under George Romney, the company also wanted to prove it could play the performance game. So engineers took the compact 108-inch wheelbase Rambler four-door hardtop shell and stuffed in their brand-new in-house 327 V8 originally, meant for the bigger Nash and Hudson. In Rebel TT Trime AMC 327 used a hotter cam and higher compression and was officially rated at 255 horsepower with a 4-barrel carburetor, a healthy number for a relatively light unibody car. Period tests at Daytona Speed Week saw 0 to 60 inches about 7.5 seconds and quarter-mile times in the high 17 seconds, making it one of the quickest American sedans you could actually buy in 1957. To make sure the Rebel wasn't just a straight-line gag, AMC backed the engine with either a 3-speed manual with overdrive or a 4-speed Hydra-matic, automatic, plus heavy-duty suspension with Gabriel shocks, a front sway bar, dual exhausts, and standard power steering and brakes. So, this economy brand suddenly had a car that could hustle, stop, and corner respectably without shaking itself to pieces. The styling was pure late 50 seconds drama, reverse, slant C-pillars, clean sides, but every Rebel came only one way. A 4-door pillarless hardtop painted silver metallic with gold anodized side trim. So, Mom's practical family car accidentally looked like it belonged on a NASCAR poster. AMC built about 1,500 of these limited edition sleepers, which helps explain why you rarely see one in the wild today. AMC planned to offer Bendix Electrojector electronic fuel injection on the 327, advertised at 288 horsepower, and demonstrated on early cars at Daytona, which would have made the Rebel one of the very first production cars with a transistorized EFI brainbox. Unfortunately, the system hated cold starts and proved unreliable. So only a tiny handful of pre-production cars ever got it, and every regular production Rebel left the factory with a trusty 4-barrel carb instead, while the fuel injection option quietly lived on only in the owner's manual and the dreams of engineers. Ford Custom Phase 1 Supercharged. In the mid-1950 seconds, Ford was getting tired of watching Chevrolet brag about fuel injection and Chrysler strut around with big Hemis. So in 1956, the Blue Oval quietly cooked up a nuclear option for 1957 stock car racing. A McCulloch VR57 centrifugal supercharger bolted to the 312 Y-Block V8. The result was a factory-rated 300 horsepower Thunderbird, Special 312, that Ford planned to sell widely in its 1957 cars and Thunderbirds. But first, they needed 100 real cars on the road to satisfy NASCAR's homologation rules. Those first 100 became the legendary Phase 1 supercharged cars. 15 two-seat Thunderbirds, 20 Fairlane 500 Sunliner convertibles, and crucially for our story, 65 humble Ford Customs, the lightest, cheapest full-size sedans in the lineup, all with 3-speed manual gearboxes. On paper, they were just low-trim 2-door poverty-spec sedans with minimal chrome, steel wheels, and a Spartan dash. But under the hood lurked that 300 horsepower blown 312, complete with experimental number parts, special carburation, fuel pump, distributor, and other one-off hardware developed for racing. Built in early 1957, just ahead of Daytona Speed Weeks, the Phase 1 Customs were essentially skunkworks, NASCAR weapons wearing taxi clothes, and contemporary testing quickly proved that the supercharged Fords were brutally fast enough that NASCAR banned both superchargers and fuel injection from competition that April, neatly cutting the program off at the knees. Ford, trying to look respectable in the wake of the AMA No Factory Racing Agreement, honored the ban, shelved plans for thousands more blown engines, and the supercharged 312 became a one-year wonder, though the later mass production Phase 2 F-code cars at least got a proper F prefix in their VINs. The Phase 1 Customs, however, never carried that F code. They slipped out of Dearborn with ordinary serial numbers and extraordinary parts, which is why today they're notoriously hard to authenticate and fantastically rare. Auction listings and feature stories usually say only 3 or 4 genuine Phase 1 Customs are documented to survive. Dodge Coronet D 501. If you've ever wondered what would happen if a luxury Chrysler 300B engine woke up one morning and found itself stuffed into Dodge's plainest 2-door sedan, the answer is the 1957 Dodge Coronet D 501. A brutally serious factory hot rod disguised as a cheap fleet car. In 1957, Dodge had already dipped its toe into performance with the D500 packages. But the D501 was something else entirely, a homologation special aimed straight at stock car racing, built on the lightest Coronet 2-door post body, with virtually no frills, and all the good stuff hidden underneath. Instead of the normal Dodge 325 Hemi, engineers raided the corporate parts bin and grabbed leftover 354 Hemi V8s from the previous year's Chrysler 300B, then fitted them with camshafts derived from the 1957392 race grind, dual Carter 4-barrel carburetors, and 10-to-1 compression for a factory rating around 340 horsepower, numbers that put this humble Coronet right in the same league as the Chrysler 300C and DeSoto Adventurer. To keep that power from twisting the car into a pretzel, Dodge backed it with a heavy-duty 3-speed manual and loaded the chassis with big 12-inch drum brakes, torsion air front suspension, reinforced leaf springs out back, and massive 15x8 wheels with 7.6x15 tires. The original idea was simple. build enough D501s to meet NASCAR's production requirements, and then go hunting Thunderbirds and fuel-injected Chevrolets on the high banks. So, Dodge ordered a special run of stripped coronets and set up the parts pipeline. In practice, modern research on surviving cars and factory paperwork suggests that only about 56 D501s were actually completed, including a handful of convertibles, even though period documents and later summaries often talk about a 100-car program. Before Dodge could fully capitalize on its new terror, changing NASCAR politics and evolving rules meant the D501 never turned a single official lap in Grand National competition, leaving this purpose-built NASCAR Dodge with no NASCAR races on its resume. Instead, the cars found work elsewhere. Several went straight to the drag strip, including one campaigned when new by future legend Arnie the Farmer Beswick, while others ended up in law enforcement duty. Today, with fewer than 10 believed to survive, the 1957 Dodge Coronet D501 sits deep in Mopar folklore as an ultra-rare one-year hammer.